I don't think the technology is quite there in places for you to replicate everything that a human would do in their sort of way of providing value. But look, I think slowly that is the pathway that we're on. It might take a little bit of time today and there might be a bit of hype, but this is really part of the AI effect in time, isn't it?
Welcome to the latest episode of the Technology Boardroom. My name is Arno. I'm the AI Product Director here at Advania UK, and I'll be your host today. I'm joined by Chris and Jake. Guys, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yep, sure. So I'm Chris O'Brien. I'm the Products and Services Director here at Advania. Lead a group of people that focus on developing our services and innovating. And AI has obviously been at the heart of that for the last couple of years, but isn't the only thing that we do, but has come into focus as you'd expect.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, Jake Harvey, leader automation team here at Advania. My team focus on everything modernization around platforms that we build automation solutions in, introducing brand new process automation technologies and solutions into organizations that we work with. One of the most important parts, the governance and enablement around these technologies as well, making sure that we've got the right security and control to really enable them to succeed.
Cool. So the topic of the podcast today is automation. So let's start simple. In the era of AI, what do we mean by automation? Isn't this just AI?
Maybe I'll start, Jake, and you come in. I mean, look, I think it is an interesting point because everything is agentic these days. And I suppose some of the concepts have morphed a little bit and changed shape and been relabeled in a sense. But it is quite interesting. So if you think about where we are in the AI era, we've had Copilot out for 2 years now. We've had ChatGPT around for 2.5 years. And kind of thinking has bounced around, are you use case oriented? Are you sort of productivity oriented? Are you both? How do agents fit into this? And exactly what is your definition of an agent? Because people do approach it differently. But I suppose the outline reflection is in so many of these cases, it's fundamentally automation underneath. It's just how things get framed and where you come at it from is a bit different these days. But Jake, you've been kind of automating processes and implementing different solutions and the guardrails for a while now. I suppose, what's your take coming to this from your background as a Power Platform expert?
Yeah. I think, fundamentally when we say automation, it's shifting the responsibility of tasks to technology. And I think traditionally how we've done that is to really try and break down the logical steps of a process, the tasks and activities are part of that process. But with the introduction of AI now, what we're going to bring into these processes is knowledge and I guess a dynamic nature to them where AI can be somewhat autonomous in how it's completing a task in a process, processing information, analyzing data as it receives it, right the way through to autonomously completing that process end to end by essentially being set on that journey by a human. So I think that is, for me, the fundamental change. But yeah, in my mind, and we've discussed this I know a lot internally, it is AI is very much a part of the automation story. It's not always the right automation solution either. And yeah, just a tool that we can bring to achieve processes more efficiently and more effectively.
And would you say, just building on that, when clients approach us these days, are we finding that they're asking for AI, but in some cases it's not really AI, it's just an automation?
Yeah, definitely. I think the big question at the moment is, what should we do with AI rather than, we've got this set of really bad processes. What's the right way to better achieve these outcomes within our organization? And I think, these split across a few different end user employee experiences. Well, it can be something that, sits in that personal productivity space where people look to jump straight to AI when it might just be quite a simple automation that can save in those minutes each day that are quite important. And then looking across quite complex processes as well, it's I think the thought now is, can we just throw that entire process at AI? And I think in some scenarios, it's more just AI becomes a single component of that process. If you think of something like sentiment analysis of processing something like a customer complaint, the majority of that process, the ingestion of that data, maybe sending out the outcome of that sentiment analysis is just traditional automation, really. But it's that analysis part that happens in the middle that AI is able to solve that makes it really a really valuable enhancement on a process that I think we've been solving for quite a long time now.
And if AI is just one approach to a larger automation opportunity, what are the other technologies or approaches that you can take that are not AI?
Yeah, I think if we go back to your, I guess, traditional automation approaches, like I said previously, it's, do you have the ability to break down and really spell out that logic that a process needs to follow? I think that's apparent in Power Automate with things like cloud-based workflows that essentially wait for a data trigger or run on a schedule and then go and perform a predefined set of tasks and achieve an action or an outcome by the end of it. Similar with RPA, where whether it's driven by an end user and recording the way in which a user interacts with a piece of software and follows those steps on repeat. I think where it's really changing now is maybe not having those predefined steps there. And I think RPA is a great example of that, of empowering AI to actually go and achieve an outcome through a computer interface. A completely different ball game to that traditional automation approach.
Yeah, and I suppose it's interesting, isn't it? We've been automating processes for decades, using different tools and technologies to do it. We do now have a different tool set that's making some things possible in ways that they weren't before. I guess what you're saying there, Jake, is there's still a bit of a focus on thinking in the way that we always have, which is interesting, almost like this part of a process, and sometimes not zooming out far enough to think about the overall thing that we're trying to achieve. I definitely observe that. But the other side that's quite interesting to me is in these new capabilities, we've now got AI that's able to sort of watch a human doing something in some respects and sort of do a different form of process mining. So we've had process mining tools in automation software for a long time, try and understand the kind of individual tasks in a process that a human is doing. But they've always been a bit rough and ready in my experience, and sometimes don't really watch a human in the way that you would like, because it's quite complex, right? We jump between different systems, we're copying and pasting things here, we're reconciling this invoice here or processing this sales lead there. And these things are complex. But I suppose one of the new things that's quite interesting is a different form of AI able to understand a process by observing and then maybe implement it, or take on some bits of that in a kind of slightly agentic way.
Yeah, it's that intelligence element to it, isn't it? It's traditional automation ultimately has no intelligence. It's executing steps, and if the steps can't be executed, it will fail. And I think we've seen that in RPA tools in the past, of ones that very much follow set user interfaces. If that software changes, then it breaks. We've definitely seen that in the past, and I think it's that addition of the knowledge that AI is bringing to these processes that enables it to be agentic in nature. It is where it's going to get really cool, that it's really leaning on a set of knowledge like a human would to go and perform specific tasks, and become that kind of intelligent automation counterpart that is what, like I say, so exciting about it.
You mentioned RPA there, so robotic process automation, and I suppose we're sort of coming into a new era of that, aren't we? Or it kind of gets superseded or replaced almost. That's how I'm seeing it, where you've got these new capabilities where the LLM is kind of a richer way of cognition. It can understand things, it can understand concepts, but it can observe, and we've got these multimodal LLMs that can maybe watch a video or watch a browser, but also use them. And I suppose we're getting to that with some of the work that OpenAI are doing around operator, as they call it, and Microsoft in their AI stack, they're calling it computer use. And this is where things get really interesting, I think. So yeah, RPA stuff used to be quite brittle in the past. You could record a screen session of you bouncing between different systems and inputting this and clicking that. But it was brittle, as you say. So if the user experience changes. But now with sort of AI's ability to more understand what's going on and almost if something changes in the system, adapt to that and flex with it based on its ability to reason a little bit and understand and think. That's pretty exciting stuff for automation, I suppose.
It is. We did a project with a client probably like 18 months ago now using Power Automate RPA, and essentially it was for a construction client. Every single week there was a set of health and safety reports in the system that they had to manually click into and hit a download button, hit a download button. Really time consuming on a Friday afternoon when people just want to start their weekend. And we implemented a process, took a set period of time to set up that automation. And the question came back from the client: oh great, now we've figured out this one, what would be the process now for this second system? And our response at the time had to be, well, it's about the same effort to go and now introduce that same solution into this second piece of technology, where I think with this intelligence element coming on top of it now, it's almost once we figure out how to implement that solution once on a system, I think that speed to value then of achieving a very similar outcome across other solutions, other technologies, other processes for an organization becomes much quicker. It's not as having to sit there and kind of manually build that process each time. It's something that AI is really going to support and help us figure out itself.
It sounds like you guys are using AI and agent almost interchangeably. What is the difference between AI and an agent? What is an agent, and how is it different from classic workflow?
Maybe I'll start, but you chime in, Jake, if you see it differently or have things to add. I suppose some of the framing from Microsoft is quite useful in that there can be different types of agent, from this spectrum of simple to complex, where at the simple end, you might have a retrieval agent, which is essentially a chatbot that's connected to your knowledge and data, but using conversational AI to help you find information, get answers. And, even if we say that's at the simpler end, that is still high value, high utility in many cases, I would say. And that's part of the Copilot value, I think, or building your own Copilot on Azure. Those scenarios will always be really productive and valuable, I think. But then you've got agents that can do other things, that can maybe take action and perform tasks, maybe update systems and databases, maybe connect different systems together, act as that integration layer. And then at the more complex end, you're maybe combining some of those, but with more autonomy. You're not giving very prescriptive information to the agent. You're more telling it the overall outcome that you're trying to achieve and asking it to use what it's capable of in terms of the systems that it connects to and the actions that it can take to get there. So I kind of feel that framing isn't bad of different types of agent. But then I suppose, something that I've tried to fix in my mind is almost like, what are the ingredients of agents that make it an agent rather than other Gen AI? And I think people have different definitions of an agent. And if you look across Microsoft and ServiceNow and Salesforce and maybe other providers out there, the definitions aren't exactly the same. But I think for me, the way I sort of rationalize it is agents have 3 or 4 things. Right. So regardless of which type they are, they have 3 or 4 attributes or characteristics. The first is the ability to connect to data and systems, right? To sort of use more than what's in the LLM itself, more than what's in the language model. It can connect to your corporate systems. It can read and write data there. I think there's the ability to use tools. So that could be to call into other automations or call into other processes. They have to be known to the agent. It's almost what the human would do, whether through a browser or through something else. These are sort of tools that the human would do in a process or a function or a piece of work that enable them to get things done. It's not just about being passive. And then I think, combine the connecting to data and knowledge and the ability to use tools and call into things. So using the browser is a tool. You could fire up a browser and go to LinkedIn and go looking for certain types of individuals, or go into HubSpot if that's your marketing or CRM platform, and kind of start, triggering some processes there. But then I think where you get to is the autonomy and this idea of being able to define an agent where it's not like coding. You're not defining step by step everything that should happen and defining logic and giving it branching and telling it how to behave. You're telling it the overall goal, which is completely different to what we've done in the past. We were in this very procedural world in the past in sort of systems development and software. And now we step beyond that, and you're able to give autonomous instructions, if you like, and that autonomy kicks in. And it's this kind of capability of a large language model, perhaps one of the reasoning models that can have a chain of thought process and can think, okay, if this is the overall goal and I've got these things at my disposal, what is the best approach to use these things? And for me, it's sort of those ingredients that encapsulate what an agent is, as opposed to just some other kind of use of AI. But I suppose I'm conscious that's not the only definition or the only way of thinking about it.
You've nailed it. I think you nailed it. So, Jack, do you want to have a go? Or
Yeah, no, I think the I think I really like the idea of the subject matter agent concept. Almost not replacing, maybe supporting that subject matter expert that everyone has in their organization. And I think the idea of attempting to automate something like a full job description is quite exciting. And I think, Chris, the points that you touched on of, what's the makeup of an agent? I think if you bring that back to the human of, people have certain knowledge that they lean on, certain skills that they use to complete certain activities, certain actions. But I quite like this idea of how do you tackle experience? Because lots of people have the same knowledge on a topic. Lots of people have the autonomy as part of their role to go and complete certain tasks. But, people have lessons learned as part of the kind of human experience they bring to a role. And I think how that will be achieved is by iterating our agents as we deploy them. And that might be by bringing that agent to life through a better technology. As the technology evolves, it might be bringing more knowledge to the overall knowledge base that agent has as your knowledge base grows within your organization. And we start to build this concept of experience by getting better at building agents, getting better at pointing at the right knowledge, how it processes that knowledge and ultimately achieves the outcome that the agent's there to achieve, and creating that subject matter agent.
And there's something in this for me, which is, I think as folks working in a Microsoft partner and not working for one of the big kind of software vendors or hyperscalers ourselves, we always have to pick our way through what's real and what is potentially a little bit of hype and noise, and what is the real state of play in the technology. And I do think in reality there is a bit of hype around agents, and every vendor is scrambling for the land grab that's kind of the AI and agent space, and everybody's reframed their messaging, and it isn't just Microsoft, it's everybody. And I think you're absolutely right in that way of thinking about it. Where the journey that we're on is kind of moving up the stack a bit from something that's quite low level, individual process, something that's a small cog in a big machine, and automating that, and maybe coming up a little bit. And what's powerful about agents, and I think why the world has latched onto them and why we've got this hype, is because the concept of an agent being kind of another member of the team, and thinking about it in that slightly humanistic way, everything that a human was capable of, that could be what an agent is capable of in time. I think that's why it's taken off and caught fire, because that's really easy to for all of us to imagine. You can imagine if we were to hire a new human colleague into a particular team, you can sort of imagine their on-ramp and sort of what it takes for them to become productive, and the kind of work that they'll do and the kind of interactions that they'll have. So when you put technology in that lens, it all makes sense and is a really powerful analogy. I do think expectations are probably a little bit overblown if somebody comes to this thinking, right, I am going to create an agent who is, the security analyst, or who is the marketing exec, or who is the kind of business development exec that's going to be as successful and productive as an experienced salesperson. I think anybody that's coming to the agent wave thinking that you're going to go through who knows, a 2-month design and prototype and build process, and voila, you kind of have somebody that was on a good salary in a in a sort of modern day society. I think that's a bit overblown. We have to start smaller. I don't think the technology is quite there in places for you to replicate everything that a human would do in their sort of way of providing value. You're going to be there quite a long time, I think, even with the tools that we've got at our disposal and modern AI. To replicate most roles is going to take investment, it's going to take time. But look, I think slowly that is the pathway that we're on, and it might take a little bit of time today, and there might be a bit of hype, but this is really part of the AI effect in time, isn't it?
Do we have to treat it like it's a new hire with completely no experience in this space, and that's it? They're on a career progression journey that we're going to take on. Yeah.
Do you think it'll come to that? I mean, how worried do we all have to be that agents are going to take our jobs?
I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it, when depending on where you tune into, if you look at the, I suppose, the kind of economist view of AI, there are huge impacts that are forecast, and lots of debate about when that starts to happen. Whether and you start to get into the kind of general intelligence question, don't you? The singularity question. When do we get to the point where AI is effectively beyond human cognition and intelligence? And I suppose some people think that we're 10 years away. Some people think that we're 5 years away. But I would say that we're starting to see the impact in the jobs market now. And, I think some roles you do see impact happening today. And the fact that you don't need quite as much human labor to complete some tasks. Whether that's going to hit all areas of society and all types of job role equally, well, probably not. And I mean, I even like kind of what's happening in the O'Brien household at the moment, where my wife is not a technologist at all. She's in a completely different field. How she's explaining it to the kids are, you either need to be in charge of the robots and kind of helping, everybody implement this, or you're on the other side, and that might be more challenging. And maybe there's some truth in that. Whatever role that you're in, even if you're not a pure play technologist, you probably need to be understanding what's relevant to you, how you could make use of these tools, how you could be more effective, more efficient, and then you probably get yourself into a good place.
As a father of 2 daughters, navigating the world of AI is very difficult. It's very difficult for my daughter, who's going into GCSEs next year, trying to decide the subject she's going to take in this world of AI. The job that she's going to do is probably not even been invented yet. Very challenging.
Yeah, we had a good client case study of this recently with big financial services firm where it was around their governance, risk, and compliance process, and they've got a system that holds thousands of risk control descriptions. So there's a risk in the office, and that risk needs to be mitigated. What is the what, why, how, when framework around that of how that will be mitigated? And quarterly, they had to produce the stats around how well these control descriptions meet this defined framework given to them by their governance and compliance department. And they'd employ a contractor to complete this that would sit there for up to 3 months, going through thousands of risk control descriptions and manually, one by one, comparing them to a framework that would essentially give each risk control description a score. So the cost of that, you can put a contractor rate against that daily and kind of come to a number. Where by utilizing the Microsoft ecosystem of technology now, we've managed to completely automate that process where it will complete that end-to-end analysis against a defined framework and spit out the results in a 2-hour period at a cost of £200 to the client. And I think with that sort of outcome, with really high accuracy, it's difficult to argue what the better solution is for the client. There's a lot of benefits that come with that. There's the ability to analyze all of the controls on demand as well. They don't have to keep waiting this 3-month period, right? When it comes to any point of audit in 2 hours, they have the results. But the way that they looked at it was that internally, their employees who sit within their GRC department are empowered to actually go and improve these control descriptions constantly and always feed back to the technology that they've now implemented to make sure that they're maintaining a high level of quality at all times. So they're definitely using it as an assistant that enables that on-demand analysis of data. But I think from a solution or AI versus human comparison there, it is just a no-brainer.
Yeah, and organizations have tons of those processes, right? I suppose the area that you're digging into there is sort of in the sphere of compliance and maybe third-party risk management. And just in that area alone, organizations spend a ton of time kind of vetting each other, agreeing controls, looking at each other's governance. Maybe it's somewhere in the supply chain that you need to audit because if you're working with sort of 30 suppliers, if there's a failure there, then it's ultimately a failure on you if you're serving your clients. So we've got this entire chain of organizations trying to validate each other and vet each other and make sure the right governance is in place. Lots of human processing, lots of kind of data and spreadsheets and questionnaires being exchanged on that, and then humans, doing quite a lot of processing. It's a great example, I think, of just one part of a company where if you shine a light, there's a ton of time being spent. There's a ton of automation and AI opportunity. And it's what's the core competency of the organization here? It's not vetting their suppliers. It's doing what they actually do and selling what they actually sell. So, I think we are on the cusp of some really interesting scenarios.
I think it's in the course of action that you take, though, as that organization of, is the value that you've proven that AI it's demonstrated that you can quickly analyze large data sets, and that's then how you proceed. We look at cross-departmental use cases where this concept of having to analyze large data sets to get to outcomes is a problem. Or do you now focus on GRC as a whole and almost create this flagship department that you try to automate a lot of their ways of working? And I've seen kind of both start to play out within a big energy client of ours. They're going down that flagship department route of how can we look at every nugget of a department and start to automate things, and then use that as a way to get buy-in from the rest of the business that this is how a flagship department looks. Now it's come out the back of this transformation. I'm not sure which is better, whether to learn how to tackle a similar problem or to just focus on an area of an organization and help them succeed.
I can see how that works, though. Create like an exemplar part of the company where we've kind of analyzed the operating model, the processes, the tasks that people do, the functions that get performed, and we've gone really hard in sort of bringing AI and automation to that. That would presumably give you a good library of use cases and implementations and building blocks that you then get to take to other parts of the organization and adapt, but kind of go back to what you've learned in doing that. And there are multiple ways of coming at this, as you say, but there's definitely logic to that, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure.
So this all sounds quite complex. So when I mention AI and automation, these topics sound very complex, I guess, for mere mortals to wrap their head around. How complex is it? Using Microsoft technology, how easy is it for someone to create a simple agent?
Shall I start with low code, Chris, and we can get to pro code? I mentioned at the beginning, I guess, the different automation experiences, at least as we view them in our team. And looking at personal productivity within Microsoft 365 Copilot, for example, that ability now that in a personal productivity context, you can create an agent, point it at knowledge, and have that agent readily available to you within your personal productivity space is a few clicks of a button, right? And I guess the problem that you have in that scenario, it's very much a black box in terms of the processing that's happening in the background, that orchestration of data. But for a lot of use cases, as we've seen, I mean, one of the members of our team who's part of our early years program messaged me a few days ago just saying, yeah, I've created an automation agent for our team. I thought it was a good idea. I've gone and pointed it at our SharePoint site. It works. Here you go. Should I tell the rest of the team about it? And it's great. Everyone in the team's using it to ask whether we've got this certain offering or we've worked in this certain sector before. I think, I guess the next step in that is when we start to look at more the defined automation scenarios and really move into building agents in something like Copilot Studio, where I think the complexity in Copilot Studio for me comes more about the integration elements and utilizing the rest of the Power Platform that it sits within. So if you're trying to ingest data from within M365, it's great. There's certain limitations around bringing data in and how much data can be brought in from within M365. But for the most part, again, it's clicks of a button, absolutely zero code. But if you're looking to bring in any third-party data, maybe the connector doesn't exist and it's not a standard connector that Microsoft offer. I think that's when you start to cross over into the low code or needed support from a developer when you're looking to create custom connectors and stringing Power Automate into this journey, for example, to go and get that data, put it in an appropriate location for you to be able to utilize that within your agent. So, yeah, I think.
Jake, what do you mean by low code?
Yeah, so by low code, I mean, we all work with the low code tool every day. If anyone says they don't use it, they're lying. Microsoft Excel is a low code technology. I guess going back years, something like Visual Basic was an original kind of player in this game, that ability to almost drag and drop an interface if you build an application or not need a full development background, a full stack development background to go and build an application. Low code enables you, whether it's through the user interface or just through the simplicity of the code that you're using, to almost be able to break down the code logic in kind of readable human language and create a solution that you need to create. So yeah, Microsoft Power Platform is the low-code powerhouse within the Microsoft ecosystem. And yeah, we see a lot of great things built within it. But yeah, me and Chris discuss a lot of when is low-code just not enough for certain solutions. And I know, Chris, you've come across a recent example that, a popular scenario now with our clients where the low-code approach just wouldn't have worked.
And I find this whole area like a really common conversation with CIOs. It's like the act of creating an agent, especially a simple agent, is not difficult at all. The challenge is actually making the right choices in this world. How do you pick the right approach? Because Microsoft alone have sort of 4 or 5 different approaches to AI and agents, and that's just in the Microsoft stack. Every organization has option going beyond that even. So how do you make the right choices? Because building an agent in sort of 2 or 3 of these ways is pretty easy. That's not where the challenge is sometimes, although it definitely is when you get into a more capable agent that maybe has autonomy and is doing systems integration or taking complex actions. But definitely some of the complexity is more navigating the landscape in the right way and making sure that you're not making too big an investment in something that you're either going to need to rebuild or you're going to run into some boundaries and limitations, because everything has a trade-off, right? So if you think about the major Microsoft options, you've got Copilot Studio, which I think is where many of today's and tomorrow's challenges do get met. Don't get me wrong. I think we are going to do a ton of work with Copilot Studio. We already are, and that's only going to increase because, it's a big part of Microsoft's agent and AI story. And perhaps in my mind, it's an evolution of the Power Platform in some ways. We built apps, we built automations in the Power Platform. In many ways, these become AI agents. They get infused with AI capabilities. There is this sort of evolution in some ways from Power Platform to Copilot Studio. And they obviously share the same connectors and so on. But look, there are other ways of building agents, building AI solutions. Microsoft now have agents in SharePoint. So many cases, what we're trying to do is unlock the kind of complex information that we've got buried in documents and put AI in the front of that. So we've now got a native embedded way of doing that in terms of agents in SharePoint. You've got full Copilot, of course, Microsoft 365 Copilot, which can be extended. But, you've got sort of certain specialties and sort of strong points about that, as well as some things to consider. You can build something a bit more tailored on Azure OpenAI, and maybe use other bits of the Azure AI stack, like Azure AI Search, maybe some of the other app and API hosting capabilities. And yeah, in some cases, that's the right choice, because some of these low code or sort of more easy to go options, the trade-off is always that there's something that you might hit that could be a limitation at some point. And it's making the right choice. Is that going to be is that going to hit in these circumstances? In many cases, it will not. And Copilot Studio or agents in SharePoint or some other sort of ready to go approach is absolutely the right way to go. And I would say that almost everything should start there. And it's only if the use case or the scenario, if you can accurately predict that you're probably going to need to connect to more data at scale, you're probably going to need to work with very large documents and therefore need to sidestep some of the kind of boundaries that the other approaches do. Or you're needing to get really specific in kind of the logic and processing that is beyond what you could achieve with instructions in an agent. You need to be a bit more definitive, and you need code effectively to define this behavior. And or what you really need is some kind of user interface. Conversational AI isn't quite enough. You need to either allow the user to do some searching and filtering or present some UX, or you need to present data back in a certain way. And you know what? Just kind of the agent UX isn't quite enough. You need screens in an app, and you can't get away from that. Some of those are factors that lead you to maybe need to build on Azure and be a bit more tailored. But I think where we've got to as an organization is we've got quite a lot of ready to go accelerators and IP on that. We've got private chat GPT, which is this sort of flexible base built on Azure OpenAI. And we've done lots of things with that. So where we've automated RFP processes for our clients, and there is quite a degree of, specificity about the RFP and bid response process, then, having the power and the flexibility to tailor and implement the AI in the way that you want, that's the right choice. But I think that's where the complexity is. It's making the choices and navigating successfully. But hopefully, one of the bits of value we bring to clients.
For organizations that are bought into the promise of automating their company through AI, obviously they're going to have possibly hundreds of processes that they need to automate. And as you've just articulated, making those decisions, whether it's pro code or low code, is you need to get it right. How do they approach making those decisions in aggregate? Because you're obviously not going to go all in on low code, all in on pro code. It'll probably be some combination of the two, right?
Yeah. And I think this sort of funneling the kind of business needs down the right technology path is the really important thing to have somehow. Look, I mean, we talk about this a lot, don't we? But I think the way we see it happening is somebody in the chain, somebody in the decision-making process, whether it's on the client side or, perhaps bringing in a partner like us, somebody needs to really understand how to navigate the choices, needs to understand what the exact boundaries and limitations are, and they move. So it needs to be keeping up with that as they change from month to month. Needs to understand kind of the cost profile of a certain AI usage. Sure, you could do this with full Microsoft Copilot, but do the economics of that stack up? Or does building on Azure give you a very different cost profile for the number of users and the amount of processing? Therefore, almost like the economics and cost is a factor. And then you come to things like the user experience. How does that need to present? What's the right way of solving this problem? All of this pathfinding, I suppose, context, I think needs to be in the operating model somewhere, right? And the way that I suppose we've built this out for clients is for us to be part of that, where we can bring folks like us. And I know that some of our clients, it is all three of us that are helping a client in this respect. But we're the kind of AI panel, which, as a monthly workshop where it's kind of bring out your latest business needs and use cases. And we will sort of try and understand the dynamics, try and understand exactly what it will take, use our knowledge of the technology, the boundaries, the limitations, the economics, the sort of automation possibility, the data source integration capabilities, the special features, and we will kind of guide things down the right path. And sure, from there, a lot of great things also need to happen, but definitely a critical step in the process. And I think that's the value of a partner that's, I'd like to think that's the value of us, right? That's, folks that are so heavily invested and immersed in AI and all of the changes and spending time keeping up. I feel like that's part of what we hope to offer.
Yeah, as a follow-up, I guess the question is, for a company that's invested in AI and want to get started, is the best approach to build the capability and wait for demand, or is the best approach to start small and expand over time, or is it some combination of the two?
That is a good question. I mean, Arno, I know you've got some thoughts on this, haven't you? Because we do run into this, I suppose, challenge, don't we? That everybody's done something on AI in the last year or two. There's been lots of proof of concepts and lots of sort of projects commissioned and exploratory work done, but we sort of have to reflect that they haven't all succeeded. Do you have a take on the right way to approach it or the right way to think about it?
I'll definitely call on Jake, who's our expert. But what I would say is, what I sense, and this is not empirical evidence, what I sense is companies are starting lots of pilots. And they're starting pilots in different parts of the business, which are not necessarily connected to each other. So maybe finance is starting a pilot with OpenAI, maybe marketing is starting a pilot with Azure OpenAI, and the pilots are not connected, and some of them are failing, and the pilots don't deliver on the promise of what AI is meant to bring. So I suspect there is a better way. Instead of running countless pilots, maybe the goal is to build an organizational capability of sorts that takes in demand, chooses the right technology, make sure that you're delivering on the promise, delivering the ROI, and using frameworks and accelerators to build the projects. And with that, Jake.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think in my mind, and I saw the same with Power Platform, and with Power Platform, it was, what should we build? What's the first solution that we should build, or should we just give people technology and they can build things and organically it will grow? And I think our clients, and I think even at the beginning of our Power Platform journey, when we were creating our own strategy, our go-to-market strategy around it, we missed that whole platform part of it initially, of the value that brings to organization. What is that platform level enablement piece where we're introducing an initial ecosystem of technologies? We've mentioned a few there. It could be Microsoft 365 for Copilot. It could be Copilot Studio. It could then be something like a enterprise private chat GPT. That's your initial ecosystem to provide in the business with AI capabilities.
But I guess the chicken and egg, Jake, would be, how would an organization know what platform to invest in without starting a pilot?
No, I think there's three streams to this. There's the enablement piece that I just mentioned at a platform level. There's what I call the engagement piece, where you're speaking to people in the business, you're understanding execs' goals, what they see, the outcome of innovation bringing to their organization. You're understanding business pain points to try and align potentially to technologies that feed back into that platform to make it appropriate for the business. And then you're providing a development solution factory arm to that as well, where you can meet the demand of the organization. And I don't think, in my mind, at least in a big organization, AI can succeed without all three being there and being thought about constantly. Because if you come across a use case in your solution build arm where you don't have an appropriate platform technology to solve it, you've either got to say no to the business or introduce a technology as part of that ecosystem that can solve those types of problems. If you're not engaging with the business to understand how they're feeling about the AI platform that they've been provided, again, you're not getting that feedback loop back into your platform team to understand at a strategic level how that needs to innovate. And I think, again, at that solution level, people are then having to lean on maybe not the right technologies, building solutions that maybe aren't fit for purpose. And the result of that, I think, is the perception of AI within the organization is failure. So I think those three things very much have to coexist.
I guess it depends on what you're testing as part of your pilots. If you're testing technology, I think an isolated pilot could run successfully and could be scaled. But you're also testing organizational change, governance processes, security, whether you can repeatedly build future or respond to future requirements from within the organization. And I think those expand the need for some kind of capability.
I think in a world where it's not just going to be professional developers building things, and I think this is where it is similar to low code development, low code strategy in a sense that, yeah, you're not just factoring in how do you the question isn't how do you enable professional developers to build things. It's how do you enable anyone to potentially get value from AI and do it effectively. So yeah, it's a bigger problem to solve.
Yeah, and with the right guardrails, right? Because you mentioned a couple of them there, but if you enable an entire business by just kind of letting them run with the sort of the licensing and the capabilities, you're probably going to find people connecting to data in ways that you didn't want, and maybe sort of data being disseminated either inside or outside or both the organization in ways that you didn't want. You're probably going to find some AI costs or kind of other technology costs that you didn't really anticipate because maybe the right guidance wasn't given in the pathfinding. You're probably going to find there could be some uses of AI that take you to challenging spots around sort of the governance and ethics in terms of how AI is used. You're starting to use it for decision making without human in the loop, and actually you're starting to impact things that need a proper responsible AI assessment, and that's not happening. And I kind of I like that analogy that I suppose we've used for a long time, that the brakes on a Formula One car aren't really just about slowing the car down. They're about enabling the car to go around the circuit as fast as possible safely. Right. And that is very much where we are with AI, isn't it? And I think what we're getting to is some of our clients that are a bit more forward leaning, they've realized that they need a slight change to their operating model. They need to institutionalize AI value creation in a certain way. You could think about it pilot by pilot, project by project, individual use case by use case, or you could sort of accept that you need a fabric that can enable innovation safely, that can allow the tools to be used safely by folks out there in the business, because agent building can be really simple and they can be high value too. But you need sort of some of these other things about how do we make sure that we're making the right technology strategy choices and kind of building for the long term. And that takes a certain mix of skills and capabilities, I would say. And, I think we're definitely finding a big uptick in interest in our services around that. Can we become the AI center of excellence for this business where, we're not only helping with the solution creation, but we're putting the guardrails and governance around AI use in place that's enabling the business to move faster themselves.
And to your point earlier, there's a lot of complexity around the technology landscape. We've got low code versus pro code, and then even within those categories, you've got different technology choices. So you need a capability that when the demand comes in, makes the right decisions. Are we going to build it low code? Is there a smarter way? Do we even need an agent? Maybe this is a script. So a capability that makes those decisions.
Yeah, I think we've been somewhere similar before, though, with not quite as complex, definitely, but with collaboration and productivity. We have been here before where you're given potentially lots of applications and services to choose from to achieve collaboration to achieve content creation. I guess, when we moved away from on-prem SharePoint to just having SharePoint online, and then in COVID, everyone had to, obviously adopt Teams. We had a big opportunity then as a Microsoft partner to help our clients solve, what is that right strategy around collaboration and productivity. And I think it's a similar mindset of, embracing that ecosystem technology. Is, you don't have one social media on your phone. There's different social medias for the right purpose. And I think it's going to be the same with AI, that you are going to end up with the right technology, the right solution, the right platform that's going to be there to help you achieve that specific outcome and goal that you're looking for.
And making the right choices so you don't get locked in and find that you've gone so far, but then you hit a brick wall. I think that's part of the art.
Cool. So we're coming to time. Just, I guess, maybe one that's a little bit more fun. Is anyone dialing into the Build keynote later?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I will be. And quite interesting to think about what to expect there. I think Microsoft will come with a couple of big announcements around Copilot and the sort of ecosystem value extending. That's the journey that they're on, isn't it? It's not sort of reduce the price of Copilot necessarily. It's extend the value. So we'll always expect more there. And, really interesting when you look across the vendors, you look across Microsoft, OpenAI themselves, but then also Salesforce, ServiceNow, HubSpot, etc. Everybody really trying to succeed in the arms race and the land grab for build your agents with us. That's what I see as happening right now. It's the sort of battle for hearts and minds in agent building. You need to be building your agents and your automations and everything that unfolds under that in our platform. And so I would expect Microsoft to continue to make a lot of noise, to be coming with a sea of announcements, to be really pushing hard on innovation and new features, and sort of quite a lot of confusion in the announcements and so on. But that's the nature of it at the moment. And I'm glad that we're all keeping up and close to the fire hose and so on. But definitely expecting something big from that. And we will see. And maybe that takes us into a follow-up discussion that we could have.
Very exciting. So thank you. I guess any closing thoughts from anyone?
I think we covered the big ones, but there's never a shortage of things to talk about here, isn't we? But maybe the closing note is look, I think organizations do need to be a little bit bold. I think nothing gets automated, nothing gets solved with AI without doing something. Right. So sure, making the right choice is really important. But, if you're thinking that this is sort of like a 2026, 2027 thing, well, it can be. But the world and most organizations' competitors will have moved on by then. And I think, the balance to strike is making the right investments, but accepting that there are huge opportunities here. We've seen so many organizations get huge value from AI today. When done in the right way, we've seen things where, the return is very legitimate, very clear in the numbers. The CFO recognizes it. And this is today. This isn't a year away. So, I'm glad that we're finding these ways of making Advania more efficient and more effective. But I think that's where every organization needs to be now.
Awesome. Agreed. Well, thanks for your time today. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. And please join us for an upcoming episode, which I'm sure will be an interesting topic. Thank you to our speakers, Chris and Jake. And I guess enjoy the rest of your day. It's really sunny where I am. Hopefully it is where you are too. Thanks all.
Thanks all.